long time. We've been intensely engrossed into completely talking about ERDs, and suddenly now we're going to make a leap towards a completely new concept. Not completely new, a little bit relevant, but some of the things that we're going to talk about are going to be new. So for now, even if it seems a bit difficult to get your mind into a new topic, just brace yourself and just like keep an open mind. We're not going to discuss too many heavy things today. We're just going to talk about relational data structure in general and what is the purpose of following a relational data model in general, right? Okay. Now, after we're done drawing the ERD in our data design phase, then we have to create something that we call the relational schema, right? Or the logical model. You'll sometimes see that we're calling it the logical model, or sometimes we're calling it the relational schema. Either way, it's another representation of our data model or our data design, but this one is closer to the physical implementation compared to our ERD. Right? This is a closer model to the actual physical implementation. In that, some of the rules that we follow in relational data structure are clearly specified here. We'll get to them one by one. First of all, let's talk about some of the terminologies and the key terminology differences where I do not want you guys to mess up, right? So far, we've talked about entities, right? There are no entities in relational schema design. There are no entities in the logical one. No. There are only relations. And don't confuse relations with relationships. Relationships between entities, that was when we were talking about ERDs, and we will leave that in ERD. ওটা ERD তেই রেখে আসবো, ঠিক আছে? That's a separate thing. Relational data structure, relational data model is a representation of our tables in our physical database. Everything is represented in terms of a two-dimensional table in our database, right? So we are calling those two-dimensional tables relations here, right? Once again, remember, no entities, only relations, right? So, for example, employee is a relation. We're going to call employee 1 a relation with the attributes employee name, dep name, salary. These are the 4 attributes of the employee 1 relation. What does this relation represent? It represents the two-dimensional employee 1 table in the database. In the employee 1 table, there are columns representing the attributes. There will be 1 column for imp ID, 1 column for name, 1 column for dep name, 1 column for salary. And what do the rows represents? What will we have in the rows? The value of each of these attributes for each of the individual instances. প্রত্যেকটা employee 1 instanceর ভ্যালুগুলো আমরা রো গুলোতে রাখবো, আর কলাম গুলোতে থাকবে id, name, dep name, salary, এই attribute গুলোর ভ্যালু, ঠিক আছে? So two-dimensional table of data basically. And that two-dimensional table of data is represented as a relation here. ভ্যালুস গুলো নিয়ে তো হচ্ছে গিয়ে আমি যদি এই যে প্রত্যেকটা ভ্যালু এখানে আনি, দ্যাট ইজ পুরো টেবিলটা এখানে আনি, then it will be difficult to represent the relational schema design or the logical model, তাই না? So that's why we will work with relations. But unlike entities, these are closer to the physical implementation, right? We're representing the two-dimensional table of data here using the relation and the attributes listed inside, right? Now, primary key, composite key, foreign key. We already roughly know what these things are. First of all, Omais, can you hear me? Omais, are you there? Omais? So 2 lectures in a row. Okay. All right then. So, and also by the way, You guys who start to leave the session the moment I start to ask the question, please remember that that is also noted down, all right? So yeah, the best thing to do in these cases would be to stay active within the session. Now, since I can't really find Omais, he's here but not here, can someone please point out in this relation, which one is the primary key?
Employee ID.
Employee ID.
Was that question very hard? Was it a difficult question?
No, ma'am.
No,
Right?
miss.
No.
No, miss.
So, okay, MPID is the primary key, right? And what does it mean for MPID to be the primary key? Now tell me that. MPID primary key.
Because it is unique to
It's
each employee.
unique.
All different instances of employees will have unique employee ID.
Every single employee one instances basically are uniquely identified based on this value. MPID is the value using which we uniquely identify every single instance of the employee one relation, right? So MPID is our primary key here. However, is it a composite key though, guys?
No, ma'am.
No, it's not a composite key. Why is that?
It's because there's just only one.
It's just a single composite হলে পাশে ফার্স্ট ব্র্যাকেট দিয়ে কমা দিয়ে থাকতো।
That's right. Basically, it's not divided up into component parts, right? Like a single valued attribute. All right.
I had one question
Yes.
regarding convention here. So the first character is a capital letter in this, or does it not matter?
Misha, can you please check your mic?
Yeah, okay. Right. So you're talking about the case, whether it's supposed the first letter is supposed to be uppercase or not, and that stuff, right? So we're not going to be pedantic about that. You can stick to a certain specific way of writing the attribute names. What's important to remember that is you stick to that style. ঠিক আছে? এটা হতে পারে যে তুমি এখানে যেভাবে আছে এভাবে রাখতে পারো, or let's say we could write the relation in this format. Let's say we could go with employee, and then we could go this way, imp ID, name, and so on. Nothing wrong with that, but everything has to be represented in the same way. All right? এই স্ট্যান্ডার্ডটা সব জায়গায় ফলো করতে হবে, যে একটাতে হচ্ছে গিয়ে এভাবে লিখলাম, আরেকটাতে এসে হচ্ছে গিয়ে আমি ডি ক্যাপিটাল দিলাম। That you shouldn't do something like that. All right. Also, we could do something like this even. So imp ID _imp_id এভাবেও রাখতে পারি, but একটাকে imp _id দিলাম,
No
বাকিগুলোর
specific
ক্ষেত্রে
convention, basically.
there is no specific convention, but কিছু যেমন for example it's not mandatory for you to write what do we call them? I forgot the term. Like আমরা যে text attach করি না যে কোডের সাথে to explain the code, that so that
Commenting.
yeah, commenting, right? So you're not it's not mandatory for you to comment, right? But কিছু স্ট্যান্ডার্ডস তো আমরা ফলো করি, কমেন্ট করতে গেলে কিছু জিনিস তো কিছু স্ট্যান্ডার্ডস আমরা ফলো করি। ওখানে যে কমেন্ট করতে গিয়ে কিছু কনভেনশন যদি ফলো না করি তাহলে আমার কোনো ভুল হবে না, মাই কোড উইল স্টিল রান, স্টিল আমরা কিছু কনভেনশন ফলো করি। ওরকম কনভেনশনারি পার্ট হচ্ছে গিয়ে যে whichever standard you pick, you stick to that. যে আমি m_id এভাবেই যদি রিপ্রেজেন্ট করতে চাই সবগুলোকে ওভাবেই করব, ঠিক আছে? এভরিথিং উইল বি লাইক দ্যাট। ধরো আমি যদি if I don't do that, if I want to do something like this, যে সব একসাথে যে MPID এভাবে definitely ভাবে, usually it's not done this way, কোন একটা ওয়েতে আলাদা করার মানে কোন না কোন একটা ওয়ে আমরা বের করি, either we do this, all right, Pascal case, either we use Pascal case like this or we use underscore or something, but underscore use করলে সব জায়গায় underscore use করবা, এরকম যদি মিক্স কেস ইউজ করতে যাও সব জায়গায় মিক্স কেস ইউজ করবা, অলরাইট? এক জায়গায় মিক্স মানে কোন একটা জায়গায় মিক্স কেস, কোন একটা জায়গায় আন্ডারস্কোর, ডোন্ট ডু সামথিং লাইক দ্যাট, রাইট? Follow the same standard everywhere for all relations, not just this relation as well. পুরো ডাটাবেসে আমরা যেটাই ফলো করব সবগুলো রিলেশনের জন্য একই স্ট্যান্ডার্ডই ফলো করব, দ্যাটস দ্য থিং। বাট এরকম কোনো রুল নেই যে না যে এটা ধরো এমপাইডি এভাবেই রাখতে হবে বা মানে underscore use করা যাবে বা করা যাবে না, এরকম কোনো রুল নেই। Okay, moving on. We already have some idea of a foreign key, no? What a foreign key is?
Yes, miss.
Yes, miss.
So a foreign
Primary
key.
key. Primary key
foreign
of
key a
an
primary key?
another. No, miss.
আরেকটা এন্টিটির প্রাইমারি কিন্তু যখন অন্য একটা এন্টিটিতে ইউজ করি।
That's right. But once again, when we are in the topic of relational data structure, we will be talking about relations, right? So employ one relation. Is there any foreign key possibly that you can notice here? Look out for something that doesn't necessarily
Department
belong.
name.
Department name. Very good.
Department name.
Exactly. Dep name here is a foreign key. All right. Department name is a foreign key. Clearly, it's probably referencing some primary key in some other relation. Okay. So dep name here is a foreign key, and that's why you see there is a notation for that as well here. Now, ERD তে foreign key নিয়ে আমরা bother করি না. We don't need to care about foreign keys in ERD. We don't need to denote foreign keys or include foreign keys in ERD at all. But in relational data structure, foreign keys are a must. If there is a foreign key, যদি কোনো foreign key থেকে থাকে, ওটা আমার relational schema design বা logical model এ ওটাকে denote করতেই হবে. If employee 1 has a foreign key or dep name, I must include it within my relation and with the right notation, no less. All right. As you can see here, there is a dashed underline underneath dep name. For foreign keys, we always use a dashed underline. Just how primary keys are denoted with a solid underline, foreign keys are denoted with a dashed underline. Okay. Dep name here is a foreign key. How do we know that? Based on the notation, because there is a solid underline. Sorry, dashed underline. Because there is a dashed underline. Based on the dashed underline, we'll be able to tell that dep name is a foreign key, referencing the dep name primary key of possibly the department relation. Right? Now, some of the rules that I was talking about in relational data model or relational schema design, right? Multi-valued attributes, which so far, first of all, was allowed in our entity relationship diagram, are not allowed in. Right? Remember, we talked just a little bit about this, minutely about this. In relational data model, every single cell must have atomic values. That is, the intersection of each row and column is going to be atomic. So no multi-valued attributes are allowed. Every single relation must have a unique name. You cannot have, there can be no two relations with the same name. You cannot have two relations with the same name. Every single relation has a unique name. Also, within a relation, inside a relation, every single attribute or every single column name must be unique as well. And obviously, because every single row in the table represents an instance, every single row will be unique, uniquely identified by the primary. প্রত্যেকটা row তো uniquely identify করছি by a primary key, তাই না? So every single row obviously is going to be unique. It represents a unique instance. So every single row definitely is going to be unique. And finally, the sequence of the columns, whether you place the employee ID first or the employee name first or the department name first, doesn't matter. And the sequence of the row, which one is placed first, doesn't matter at all either, right? Now, take a look at the first table here, the one at the top. Does this table follow the rules that we've just stated? What do you think? Take a look specifically at the course title column and the date completed column with respect to the emp ID value. How many values do we have for course title for emp ID 100?
Two.
Ma'am.
Two.
2.
XPSS and surveys. Similarly, in association with that, two date completed values as well for a single employee, emp ID. For a single emp ID 100. Is that in keeping with the rules that we've just discussed?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
No. In relational schema design, we will not have anything like this because relational schema design reflects directly our actual database tables. Relational schema design কিন্তু ওই টেবিলগুলোকে directly represent করে। So table এ, remember relational data model follow করলে আমাদের database table এ কোনো multi-valued attribute রাখা যাবে না। So relational schema design এও you have to reflect that. So this is something that is not allowed. Keep that in mind. Now, what could be a possible solution for that? বলতে পারো যে আচ্ছা এই দোনোটা কোর্স টাইটেল তো হচ্ছে কি এমপ্লয়ি 100 এর জন্য, এই দোনোটা ডেট কমপ্লিটেড ভ্যালু এমপ্লয়ি 100 এর জন্য। সো আমি আলাদা আলাদা করে দিই, ঠিক আছে? অ্যাজ ইউ ক্যান সি হিয়ার ইন দ্য টেবল অ্যাট দ্য বটম, দ্য সেকেন্ড টেবল, দ্য ভ্যালুস আর সেপারেটেড। কি করা হচ্ছে, আমার প্রথম রোতে হচ্ছে কি আমি SPSS আর ডেট কমপ্লিটেড আলাদা করে দিলাম, সেকেন্ড রোতে সার্ভিস আর এই যে সার্ভিসের ডেট কমপ্লিটেড আলাদা করে দিলাম। So what's going on? In the second table now, there are no multi-valued attributes anymore. So আমরা একটা problem solve করেছি, no more multi-valued attributes. However, I
But
would
the
say
rows are not unique.
that's right, exactly, very good. The rows are no more unique, no longer unique. Why? Because who is uniquely identifying the row?
এমপ্লয়ি
Row-
আইডি।
Employee ID.
That's right. Emp ID is the one who is uniquely identifying the rows. But are the emp ID values unique anymore?
No.
No. Unique মানে কি? একটা single emp ID value একটা single row কেই represent করবে. That's what it means to be unique. All right? But that's not what's happening here. এখানে তো হচ্ছে কি আমার এই emp ID 100 is representing maybe 2 rows. It's not unique anymore. So actually, the rules are still not being followed. একটা problem solve করেছি, but we're not still done yet. Why are we having this issue at all? Think about it. Can anyone figure out এই যে এই ধরনের issues গুলো কেন হচ্ছে?
Because we have no way to separate.
Come again?
We have no way to separate like a course can like multiple courses can be completed by one employee.
Multi-value issue.
It is by nature multi-value. So এখানে একটা টেবিলে
Why does it have to be by nature multi-value?
like
Why does it
according
have
to
to be
our
like that?
design like assumptions এখানে এই দুটো
No,
টেবিলে
no.
ওদের
Design টাই question করো. Question the design. Why is it like that at all? Why are the course information in the employee table at all?
there should be like a course completed table.
It should be a separate table basically, তাই না? কোর্সের তো একটা আলাদা টেবিল থাকা উচিত। Or employee completes course আলাদা টেবিল রাখবো, কোর্সের আলাদা টেবিল রাখবো, whatever. But মোট কথা ছিল আমি এমপ্লয়ি টেবিলের মধ্যে কেন এই জিনিসগুলো রাখবো? Alright? So we should, like you said, we should have a separate table. So the main source of problem here is because we did not do a thorough job in our relational schema design and when we were doing our ERD. ERD আর relational schema ডিজাইনের সময়ে যদি আমরা এমপ্লয়ি আর কোর্স অথবা কোর্স কমপ্লিটেড whatever that is আলাদা টেবিল যদি ক্রিয়েট করতাম then we wouldn't have this issue at all, right? So people who do not do or do not create an ERD or do not thoroughly create a relational schema design, they would end up with problems such as these. There are ways to solve problems at these stages as well. এই ধরনের টেবিল যদি আমার অলরেডি ডেটাবেসে থাকে ওটাও সলভ করার প্রবলেম আছে, we'll look at those techniques. We call them normalization techniques. আমরা এটা দেখবো after relational schema design. But before getting there, before getting to the cure, we will try to prevent the problem completely. We will try to prevent the problem by doing a thorough job in our ERD and relational schema design phase. All right? Now, এখানে যে রুলস গুলো বলা আছে so far যেগুলো আমরা স্পেসিফাই করেছি, on top of that we have some other rules that we need to keep in mind, we must be mindful of when we are creating our relational schema design to specifically avoid situations such as these. All right, first and foremost, the domain constraint rule. All right, the domain constraint rule basically specifies that every single column must have values from the same domain. That is, এই যে emp id তে সবগুলো ভ্যালু দেখো, what are they? These are all integers, right? These are all numbers. So if the data type for emp id is integer, then all values must be integer from the same domain. You cannot have alphanumerics here. Name here, these are all alphanumerics. এখানে এসে যদি তুমি এখন কোন একটা নাম দাও হচ্ছে গিয়ে different একটা data type follow করে, right? It's a Boolean data type. You cannot bring in a Boolean data type here. All of them must be of the same data type, the same domain. Salary, let's say, for example, salary, let's say it's going to be a float, right? Or double, whatever you call it. All of them has
Each
to be
column must have the same data type.
exactly as simple as that. Each column or each attribute must have a predefined data type, and every single value under that specific column must be of that data type. That is the domain constraint. Date completed, all are date values, date time values, right? So date value এখানের মধ্যে মাঝখানে আমি হুট করে একটা epoch time ঢুকাতে পারবো না, ঠিক আছে? All of them must be date data type. It cannot be একটা data type একটা date time আরেকটা epoch time. You cannot have that. Date type data type হচ্ছে কি আমার আগে থেকে স্পেসিফাই করে দিতে হবে, and we must follow that data type for all the values under a specific column. All right? And some of the other rules. This one we already know, we've talked about this. Every single relation must have a primary key. Remember, in ERD, sometimes we can skip on the primary key. For example, associative entity কিছু example দেখেছো যেখানে হচ্ছে কি primary key টা denote করা হয়নি. Anything else can you think of যেখানে হচ্ছে আমরা primary key denote করি না? That we've recently already discussed. Subtypes, that's right. However, in relational schema design, there is no such thing as that. Every single relation, whether it's a subtype, whether it's an associative entity, যেটার জন্য তুমি relation create করে থাকো, the moment you convert from entity to relation, entity থেকে relation convert করার সাথে সাথে, it must have a primary key. Every single relation will have a primary key, and the primary key must have a valid value. That is primary key হওয়ার জন্য যা যা requirements আছে, all requirements must be fulfilled, which we know from our previous sessions, that it must be unique, it must maintain the value throughout its life cycle, that it shouldn't be subject to change, and it cannot be null. All of these rules are there in place. The fact that it cannot be null is so much important that we have a separate rule for that. The entity integrity rule, that every single primary key must have a value, it can never be null. Okay. And then we have the referential integrity constraint for foreign keys. Remember, what are foreign keys? Foreign keys are referencing the primary key of some other table or some other relation. Dep name here is a foreign key referencing the primary key of some other relation. And dep name must either reference a value from the department table, which is there under the dep name primary key column, or it should be null. That is, dep name either department table কোন একটা dep name value কে reference করবে অথবা null থাকবে. You can never put any garbage value or any random value in an attribute under an attribute which is a foreign key. ঠিক আছে? dep name এর এখানে এসে আমি হচ্ছে কি ABCDFG কোন একটা random value কখনো assign করতে পারবো না. It must be either a value which actually exists in the department table under the dep name column, or it has to be null. Either department table এর primary key যে ভ্যালুগুলো আছে ওখান থেকে একটা ভ্যালু হতে হবে, it must exist in the department table under the primary key column, whichever may be, or it should be null. Random কোনো value foreign key তে বসানো যাবে না. That is the referential integrity constraint that must be in place. All right. See how we maintain referential integrity in our relational schema design. And by the way, our logical model or the relational schema design must look like this. That is, this is the notation that we will follow. The name of the relation right at the top, then the attributes separated in cells. All right. So এরকম একটা row of cells, as you can see here, much like arrays, as you've seen. So this is exactly what you need to follow, the notation, the exact notation. Sharp-edged rectangles, and within the rectangle, you have a partition for representing each of the attributes. Within this rectangle, you have partitions, each of the cells containing the attributes. And rectangle উপরে হচ্ছে গিয়ে I will have the name of the relation in all caps, preferably in all caps. So here,
This is the relational schema, right? That you showed.
That's right, the relational schema design or the logical model. This notation here is not something you can follow. There have been cases where the entire relational schema design is 100% correct, but because they have followed this notation, they got a 0. Trust me, that actually has happened multiple times at that. So if you follow the wrong notation, much like ERD, even in relational schema design, you follow the wrong notation, you don't get any marks at all. So A notation কে এখানে দেয়া আছে initially হচ্ছে কি আমাদের just বুঝার জন্য, not to go into it full-fledged, but this is the notation ultimately that you will have to follow. প্রত্যেকটা রিলেশন এরকম একটা রেক্ট্যাঙ্গুলার বক্সে আমি রিপ্রেজেন্ট করবো, বক্সের ভিতরে হচ্ছে কি আবার পার্টিশন দিয়ে ছোট ছোট বক্স থাকবে, প্রত্যেকটা সেলে হচ্ছে কি আমি অ্যাট্রিবিউটগুলোর নাম রাখবো, আর রিলেশনটার উপরে হচ্ছে কি রিলেশনটার নাম থাকবে। The customer relation here, for example, customer ID, obviously I'm linking because it's already underlined, and then the rest of the attributes, customer name, address, city, state, separate cells. The order relation, we have the order ID primary. Okay, what is this, guys?
Foreign key.
Foreign key.
The foreign key, that's right. It's the foreign key, customer ID in the order relation. Order relation in customer ID is a foreign key referencing the customer ID primary key of the customer relation. And see here, this arrow is a part of the notation as well. The arrow points towards the parent or the origin or the source. Parent বলতে super type subtype relationship এর কোনো কিছু না কিন্তু, don't get that confused. Origin বুঝাতে চাচ্ছি আমরা, ঠিক আছে? যে the foreign key, whenever you have a foreign key, you must have an arrow pointing towards the source or the origin or the primary key which it is basically referencing. So here in order line relation, for example, what can you say about order ID and product ID?
It's composite
What are
keys.
Order ID, product ID together make up the composite key. Sure. How do we know that?
Both of them are primary keys. Like both of them have the same underline.
Both of them are the primary keys, sure, but how do we know even that?
They're underlined.
Solid underline.
Because they are
And in
referencing.
fact, no, not that. Not that. Don't get that confused. That has nothing to do with this. You're talking about composite key. You were talking about composite key. Why is it a composite key? Because they have solid underlines. In fact, both of them, we cannot say that both of them are primary keys individually. Order ID alone is not the primary key here. Product ID alone is not the primary key here. Order line relation, in fact, has a composite key. And why can we say that? Because both of these have a solid underline, which means that if we combine both of these together, then we have a primary key in our hands, right? We get the primary key once we combine both order ID and product ID together. So it's a composite key, sure. Very good. Solid underline ache, so it's a composite key which is made up of order ID and product ID. In that case, what do the arrows represent? Why do we have arrows here? We know that arrows, we use arrows when we want to represent the referential intensity, right? What do the arrows represent? It represents the fact that here, in fact, order ID is a part of the primary key and a foreign key for order line at the same time. So it's not necessarily going to be the case যে একটা attribute যদি primary key হয়ে থাকে অথবা if it's a part of composite key, it cannot be a foreign key. No, it can be both at the same time. Remember that always. So whenever you're asked, you need to talk about both things. If you're asked about order ID, product ID, first you need to say that they are composite keys, right? It's a composite key. Both of them together make up the primary key of order line. Order ID and product ID together make up the primary key of order line. And how do we know that? Because of the solid underline. However, the arrows tell us that order ID and product ID individually, they are also foreign keys for the order line relation. Order line relation এর মধ্যে order ID is a foreign key referencing the order ID primary key of the order relation. Product ID is also foreign key referencing the product ID primary key of the product relation. In that case, you may ask, where is the dashed line? Where is the dash underline? When an attribute is both a foreign key and a primary key at the same time, or both a foreign key and part of the primary key at the same time, the primary key notation takes precedence. So we must use a solid underline to represent the fact that they are the primary key or part of the primary key, and the arrows help us to denote the fact that they are also foreign keys. All right? So here we have a dashed underline. Here we have a dashed underline because they are simply foreign keys, and that's all. Customer ID is a foreign key and it's only a foreign key, that's all. However, here, order ID and product ID, they're not just foreign keys, they're also a part of the primary key of order line relation. So we must use the solid underline to represent the fact that they are part of the primary key. Together they make up the composite key, or the primary key, whatever you call it. But we must have the arrows as well. Why? Because we also need to denote the fact that order ID, for example, is referencing the order ID primary key of the order relation. So order ID is a foreign key for the order line relation as well. Product ID is also a foreign key of the order line relation. And we denote that by this arrow pointing towards the origin. And remember, always the arrowhead points towards the origin. The arrowhead points towards the primary key that is being referenced. Right? Any questions so far?
Miss, here both of the keys of the composite thing, they're referencing to the primary keys in other relation tables. Can it reference to an attribute in another table which is not a primary key?
In that case, would it be a foreign key?
Yeah, because
Just
it's
be an
referencing.
inherited
The point
attribute
of what is the
probably.
point of primary key foreign keys? Why do we have primary keys and foreign keys in place? You will see that quickly once we map notations from ERD to our relational schema design. You will see that we use primary keys and foreign keys to establish the relationship between entities. A relational schema design or logical modeling a relationship bolte kono kotha nei. There is no such thing as relationship. So the fact that a customer has a relationship with order, এই জিনিসটা আমি কিভাবে represent করব? That is, a customer places an order. ধরো একটা order ID আছে 1001, which was placed in a certain order, a certain date, blah blah blah, whatever. The customer who placed this order, এই রিলেশনশিপটা আমি কিভাবে মডেল করব? By bringing in a foreign key customer ID and putting the customer ID of that customer who placed this order. এখন যদি ওই কাস্টমারের আমি ফার্দার ডিটেইলস জানতে চাই, এই কাস্টমার আইডি ট্র্যাক করে আমি কাস্টমার রিলেশনের কাস্টমার আইডি প্রাইমারি কিতে যাব, এন্ড ওই কাস্টমার আইডি প্রাইমারি কি ট্র্যাক করে আমি কাস্টমার নেম, অ্যাড্রেস, সিটি, স্টেট, জেড এগুলো বের করতে পারবো। So there isn't a possibility of ever having that scenario where it's referencing a regular attribute. Why do we have primary keys and foreign keys in place at all? আছে কেন এটা? এই রেফারেন্সটা মেইনটেইন করতে পারার জন্য। রেফারেন্সটা আমার কেন লাগছে? এই যে কাস্টমার একটা অর্ডার প্লেস করেছে, একটা রিলেশনশিপ আছে আমরা জানি ফ্রম ইআরডি। এখন এই অর্ডারটা কে প্লেস করেছে, এই ইনফরমেশনটা আমি কিভাবে ট্র্যাক করব? টেবিল ড্র করার সময় তো রিলেশনশিপ বলতে কোনো কিছু নেই। It's a table. It's a two-dimensional table. As simple as that. You just have information there. So আমি কিভাবে এই ফ্যাক্টটা, এই বিষয়টা রিপ্রেজেন্ট করব that a certain customer has placed this order by bringing in a foreign key customer ID, which is referencing the customer who has placed this order via the customer ID primary key of the customer relation. So if you keep that purpose in mind, is there a possibility of ever having to reference an attribute which is not a primary? That will never be the case. The purpose of primary key foreign key references, the purpose of referencing this is to always maintain, establish that connection, which relation did what for some other relation. ঠিক আছে? আর এই রেফারেন্সটা তো আমরা মেইনটেইন করব always using primary keys and foreign keys, never anything else. কাস্টমার আইডি কে, মানে কোন কাস্টমার অর্ডার প্লেস করেছে এটার জন্য আমার প্রাইমারি কি লাগবে। কাস্টমার নেম দিয়ে তো আমি এটা বের করতে পারবো না, কাস্টমার নেম মাইট নট বি, অ্যাড্রেস দিয়ে বের করতে পারবো না, সিটি দিয়ে বের করতে পারবো না, স্টেট জিপ দিয়ে বের করতে পারবো না, কাস্টমার আইডি দিয়ে বের করবো। So always we will reference it in this way. Okay? Make sense, Wakil?
Yes, yes.
Okay, moving on. So while we're talking about that, while we're talking about referential integrity, some rules that you will see that you will have to specify when you go into SQL, whether you're following the cascade rule, restrict rule, set to null, because of referential integrity. Remember that a foreign key must have such a value which already exists under the primary key column of the relation it is referencing. That is যে এখানে আমি কাস্টমার আইডির আন্ডারে এমন কোনো ভ্যালু রাখতে পারবো না যেটা কাস্টমার টেবিলে কাস্টমার আইডি কলামের আন্ডারে এক্সিস্ট করে না, এরকম কোনো ভ্যালু আমি রাখতে পারবো। Either it will be a value which is already there, which already exists in the customer table, which is referencing a value that exists in the customer table under the customer ID column, or it can be null, nothing else. So if that is the case, let's say for example, Maruf has created an account to be a customer of Daraz, right? Daraz এর কাস্টমার হলো, সে Daraz একটা অ্যাকাউন্ট ক্রিয়েট করবে, ঠিক আছে? এখন দারাজের ডেটার পলিসি হচ্ছে গিয়ে তাদের যারা কাস্টমার আছে অ্যাকাউন্ট ক্রিয়েট করে তাদের ডেটা তো অফকোর্স কাস্টমার টেবিলে থাকবে তাদের ডেটাবেসে, বাট যখন একটা কাস্টমার তার অ্যাকাউন্ট ডিলিট করে দেয়, কাস্টমার নট ডিঅ্যাক্টিভেটিং, ডিলিট করে দেয় যখন, তখন হচ্ছে গিয়ে ওই কাস্টমারের ডেটা কাস্টমার টেবিল থেকে তারা ডিলিট করে দেয়, ঠিক আছে? So Maruf, let's say he becomes a customer of Daraz and creates an account, so he has his data in the customer table. Then he places to order, right? He places an order, let's say for a t-shirt, all right, for an anime that he's watching or and he likes. And then Daraz misplaces that order or something like that, but the order is already there. The moment Maruf places the order table কিন্তু এটা রেকর্ড আমি নিয়ে এসেছি। Order ID, let's say 1001, order date হচ্ছে গিয়ে 2021 September 24th, and customer ID is Maruf's customer ID. Let's say Maruf's customer ID is 23, customer ID 23, 1001, 2021 something something, and then customer ID 23. ভালো কথা। Then Maruf decides that হচ্ছে গিয়ে Daraz এর কাস্টমার থাকবে না, he's going to delete his account. So he deletes his account. Customer table থেকে Marufের row যেটা ছিল, the row which represented Maruf's data, that row is deleted. What will happen to the order table? Remember that in the order table under customer ID, we have Maruf's customer ID 23. What will happen to that value? Following referential integrity constraint, the moment Maruf's data is deleted from customer table, can we have 23, customer ID value 23 in the order table anymore? Can we have that? No, we cannot. Try to follow what I'm saying. Maruf created an account with Daraz and his customer ID is 23, or customer information customer table আছে. He places an order for a certain t-shirt, right? Order ID, let's say 1001, order date something, and customer ID 23. And then for some reason, Maruf decides that he will delete his account from Daraz, he will never purchase from them or via them. So delete করে দিল, and Darazের পলিসি হচ্ছে কি কোনো কাস্টমার যদি অ্যাকাউন্ট ডিলিট করে দেয় তার ডেটা কাস্টমার টেবিল থেকে রিমুভ করে দেওয়া হবে। সো মারুফের রো রিমুভ করে দেওয়া হলো, দ্যাট ইজ কাস্টমার টেবিলে 23 কাস্টমার আইডি এখন আর এক্সিস্ট করে না, দেয়ার ইজ নো কাস্টমার আইডি 23 ভ্যালু। তাহলে অর্ডার টেবিলে যে কাস্টমার আইডি 23 আছে, ক্যান উই হ্যাভ দ্যাট? নো, উই ক্যানট। Following the referential integrity constraint, we cannot do that. Then what do we do? How do we handle such scenarios? Rules. We must have certain rules in place beforehand. আগে থেকে এই জিনিসগুলো হ্যান্ডেল করার জন্য রুল আমার প্লেস করতে হবে, and that rule can either be a cascade rule or a restrict rule or a set to none. The cascade rule states that everything that's associated with the instance that has been deleted will be deleted as well. So the moment Maruf's information is deleted from customer table, every single order row that is associated with Maruf's customer ID will be deleted as well. That is order table গিয়ে database or DBMS, actually order table গিয়ে DBMS will search for all the rows where customer ID value is 23. সে একটা রো পেলো, ওই রোটাকেও সে ডিলিট করে দিল। Cascade rule means that the moment Maruf's customer information is deleted from the database, from the customer table. Automatically, the DBMS will search for Maruf's customer ID in the tables that are referencing customer ID as a foreign key. There is an order table. There is an order table which is referencing customer ID primary key of the customer table. All right. So order table গিয়ে সে customer ID under দেখবে 23 ভ্যালুটা আছে কিনা, কোন রোতে আছে, it will delete that row. So ওই row delete করার পর আমার order ID চলে গেল না? So that order ID is removed. Then what will happen?
Then order line will also
Order line.
That's right. Remember, প্রবলেমটা কিন্তু ক্যারি ফরওয়ার্ড হচ্ছে যে অর্ডার আইডি আমি রিমুভ করে দিলাম, অর্ডার আইডি 1001 রিমুভ করে দিলাম, বাট অর্ডার আইডি 1001 অলসো এক্সিস্টস ইন অর্ডার লাইন। সো অর্ডার লাইন থেকে আমার ওই রোটা রিমুভ করে দিতে হবে। অর্ডার লাইন টেবিলে যেই রোতে অর্ডার আইডি ভ্যালু ইজ 1001, যেই রো গুলোতে the row or the rows in which the order ID value is 1001, even those rows will have to be deleted. However, will we have any issue for the product ID in those rows?
No.
No,
Because
very
the
good.
reference is
Because the source is not in order line. The origin is not in order line. So product ID, the rows in which order ID value was 1001, ওই row গুলো delete করলেও ওই row গুলোতে যে product ID value গুলো deleted হলো, that will not affect our product table at all. Remember that, because here remember product ID from order line table. Product ID from order line table is the one which is referencing product ID of product table. So origin কিন্তু product table. Origin থেকে তো আমি কোনো কিছু delete করছি না. Alright? So actually order ID 1001 delete করতে গিয়ে যে product ID গুলো আমার deleted হবে from the order line table, that will not affect my product table at all. Alright? So
You're
far,
deleting the entire row in the order line.
yes, we are deleting the entire row in the order line for sure.
This is
But-
for like cascade, right? Like
Yes.
delete on cascade, right?
Yes, we are deleting the row, but that's not what we're talking about here. See here, the moment we delete a row from the customer table, it affects the customer ID in the order table. Why does it affect it? Why? Because customer ID in order table is referencing customer ID primary key of customer table. So Maruf information, যদি আমি delete করি, customer ID number 23, order table যেই row গুলোতে customer ID value is 23, those rows must be deleted following the cascade rule. Similarly, the moment you delete the rows where customer ID value is 23, you're deleting the entire row, remember. So order ID 1001, which was associated with customer ID 23, will also be deleted. এখন order ID 1001 delete করলেও একটা problem carry forward হবে. Why? Because in order line table, order ID is referencing order ID primary key of order table. So order table থেকে আমি যখন 1001 delete করে দিব, remove করে দিব, order line table, remember we have to do the same thing, because once again we cannot have a foreign key referencing a value that does not exist in the origin. Origin যেটা আমার order table exist করে না এমন কোনো value তো সে reference করতে পারবে না following the referential integrity rule. So order ID 1001 we will delete it following the cascade rule. So order ID 1001 যদি order line table থেকেও delete করতে যাই, তো যেই row গুলোতে order ID value is 1001, all those rows will be deleted. However, what I'm trying to make you understand and what you should remember is in the order line table, আমি যেই রো গুলো থেকে order ID 1001 delete করছি ওখানে তো একটা product ID value আছে না? Those product IDs will also be removed from the order line table, right? However, remember that it will not affect the product table at all. Why? Because we are not deleting the product ID. We are not deleting the product ID from the origin table. No. Product ID কিন্তু আমি parent table থেকে delete করছি না. We are not deleting product ID from the product table. We are deleting it from the order line table which is referencing the origin. এই জায়গায় প্রবলেম কেন হয়েছে? কারণ কাস্টমার আইডি আমি অরিজিন থেকে রিমুভ করে দিয়েছি, সোর্স থেকে আমি কাস্টমার আইডি রিমুভ করে দিয়েছি। সো রেফারেন্স যেখানে আছে ওখানে গিয়ে আমার I have to handle it somewhere. Once again, once we try to remove customer ID, order ID removed হয়ে গেল from the order table. So again, order ID কিন্তু is at the source of the order table. So source থেকে আমি order ID remove করে দিচ্ছি. So যেই টেবিলে order ID কে reference করা হচ্ছে, I have to handle that. However, এখান থেকে যদি product ID remove হয়, that's not a problem because product ID here in order line table is a foreign key. That's why it's important to remember which one is the foreign key. It's a foreign key. It's not the primary key of the product table. We're not removing product ID from the source, which is the product table. We're removing it from the order line table. So it will not affect the product table. If you remove it from the source, then it affects the table where it's being referenced. But এখানে তো আমি reference remove করছি, not the source. We are removing the reference, not the source. So that is not an issue. Revisit this topic and make sure you understand that. Okay? Now, you may think that a deleted ঝামেলা টামেলা আমি করতে চাচ্ছি না. I don't want to go with cascade. So are there any other options? Yes, there are. Restrict rule, set to null rule. Restrict rule যেটা করবে সেটা হচ্ছে কি when you try to delete customer ID, the DBMS will tell you you cannot delete the customer information for customer ID 23. So মারুফের information তোমাকে delete করতেই দিবে না. It will give you an error notification দিবে telling you that the customer ID that you're trying to delete is being referenced in other tables. So যেটা করবে before deleting Maruf's customer information, before doing that at all, the DBMS will first look, does this customer ID 23 exist in any other table where customer ID is being referenced? দেখলো যে order table customer ID is being referenced. সে first search করবে order table, are there any rows where customer ID 23 exists? If there is, it will give you an error notification that this customer is being referenced in another table. First, handle that. So you can do whatever you want. You can go and first delete that customer ID's reference from the order table or set it to null or whatever. যেটা ইচ্ছা করো, but first you have to handle that scenario before deleting that specific customer's information. Basically, restrict rule doesn't allow you to delete at all if that value exists in some other table where customer ID is being referenced. If it doesn't exist, তাহলে delete করে দিবে. But if it exists, it won't allow you to delete at all. You first have to handle the case in the reference. Reference-টাকে somehow তোমার either null করে দিতে হবে or অন্য একটা reference নিতে হবে or ওই row-টা delete করে দিতে হবে or something like that. Right? And then finally,
Manually,
they set to
we
null.
have to do it basically.
Come again?
We have to do it manually basically.
That's right. So, and finally, the set to null rule. Set to null rule, what it does is automatically it will set the customer ID 23 to null value. That is order থেকে কোনো row delete করবে না. Let's say মারুফের row আমরা delete করলাম and the set to null rule is in place. So what's going to happen is in the order table, the row where customer ID value is 23, that value, only the customer ID value 23 will be changed and set to null. Order ID 1001 is still there. Order date 2021 September 24 is still there. Only the customer ID value will be null. Right? Because remember, following the referential integrity constraint rule, we are allowed to keep it null. If it does not reference a value that exists, we are allowed to keep it null. Right? So set to null rule automatically customer ID can null করে দিবে. But বাকি সব information থেকে যায়. So that কোনো problem carry forward হয় না. That's it. So case to case it varies. So based
Yes.
on what your client's preference is, or if the client has no preference, what your preference is, how you would best feel to organize their data, you have to set a rule beforehand. All right? Yes, was there a question?
Miss, you answered it. You just answered it.
Okay, all right, okay. So moving on, finally, if the rules that we have discussed so far are not in place, what are the problems? Why are we talking about all these rules that may even seem boring to some of you guys? Why? Because these are the rules that make up our relational data model. These are the foundations of our relational data model. Because of these rules, our relational data model is sometimes error proof, all right? More often than not, it is less prone to errors. Look at this table. Look at this table, the first one, where we haven't followed the rules of relational data model at all. Relational data structure, কোনো rules follow করি। What's going to happen when you delete, let's say, Margaret Simpson's information? Margaret Simpson's rowটা আমি delete করে দিলাম। Everything will be deleted, including the course titles, SPSS and surveys. Right?
So by default, it's the cascade rule.
No, we're not talking about cascade rule here at all. এটা তো relational data structure follow করছে না। We're not talking about the cascade rule. এখানে তো referencing নাই. There is no cascade rule comes in when we're talking about references. There is no reference here. Cascade rule, set to null rule, restrict rule, these are for foreign key, primary key references and how to handle those when a certain source is deleted, all right? That's a separate thing. Regardless of that, think about what's going on here. If I were to delete Margaret Simpson's data, post title, spaces, and surveys are going to be deleted as well. So I am losing information on courses because I'm deleting an employee data. Employee data delete করতে গেলে আমার course information কেন lose করতে হবে? Let's say, for example, surveys post title isn't there for any other. That is, none of the other employees have done a course on surveys, all right? অন্য কোনো employee surveys এর course করেনি, শুধুমাত্র Margaret Simpson করেছে, all right? If you delete Margaret Simpson's data, and if you take a look at the database table now, we will see that surveys নামে কোনো course-ই নেই. But actually surveys নামে তো একটা course আছে. There is a course named surveys. There is a course for some surveys. But we are losing that information. Something like that we call a deletion anomaly. That's an anomaly. That shouldn't happen, right? There is, in fact, a course that is offered called surveys. Maybe none of the employees in a certain organization have done that course, but the course is still there. But we lose that information just because we are deleting Margaret Simpson's data. That shouldn't be the case. Employee data delete করলে course information আমি কেন lose করব? That shouldn't be the case. What happens when we are trying to insert data? Let's take a look at here. When we try to insert the data for a certain course, can we insert the data of the course without the employee? ধর একটা নতুন কোর্স অফার করা হবে, ঠিক আছে? New course will be offered for Flutter, let's say. Flutter আমি কোন একটা কোর্স অফার করছি আর আমি এখানে ইনসার্ট করতে চাচ্ছি. So far none of the employees have done that course. Can I insert that data here without an employee?
No, ma'am.
No, we cannot. And that shouldn't be the case. আমার কোর্সের ডেটা এন্টার করার জন্য আমার একটা এমপ্লয়ি ডেটা লাগবে. That is insertion anomaly. That shouldn't happen. Finally, update anomaly. When you want to update the data, let's say, ধরো ট্যাক্স এর নাম হচ্ছে কি আমি চেঞ্জ করে ফুল ফর্মটা দিতে চাই, ধরো I don't even know what that is, tax account, let's say, all right? For let's say tax act represents tax account. So আমি নামটা চেঞ্জ করছি, ঠিক আছে? If I do that, or even let's say tax account tax ACC জায়গায় tax হচ্ছে গিয়ে AC রাখলাম. Either way, post title কোন একটা নাম চেঞ্জ করলাম, ঠিক আছে? So what am I going to have to do? I'm going to have to update that data everywhere, all right? Let's say SPSS. SPSS এর কোর্স টাইটেলের নামটা চেঞ্জ করে আমি ফুল ফর্মটা দিতে চাচ্ছি, whatever that may be. SPSS is probably some software or something that we use. But so SPSS, say full formটা আমি দিতে চাচ্ছি, all right? So what do I have to do there? I have to update it in this row as well as this row. In this row, the first row as well as the second last row. This one. দোনোটা জায়গায় আপডেট করতে হচ্ছে. Now think about what happens when you have thousands and thousands of rows of data. What if you miss one? You lose your data integrity. That's update anomaly. Let's say 20টা জায়গায় আপডেট করতে হবে, you just miss one. Right away you lose the data integrity. That's update anomaly. So এই anomaly গুলো কেন হয়? When we do not follow these rules, right? When we do not follow these rules. These and many such anomalies. You will have these anomalies if you don't follow referential integrity constraints as well. Referential integrity যেগুলো এগুলোর ক্ষেত্রে হচ্ছে কি এই সেম anomaly গুলো হবে। Let's say for example এই যে customer ID কথাটা যে বললাম, customer information delete করলাম but customer ID 23 exists in order table. Order table customer ID under 23 নামে একটা customer আছে। Then when you look up into the order table and you cannot find who this customer is, how do you know what happened? You don't know whether this value has been entered wrongly, that is 23, এটা এই ভ্যালুটাই কি ভুলভাবে ইনসার্ট করা হয়েছে নাকি কাস্টমার ডেটাটা ডিলিট করা হয়েছিল নাকি what happened, you have no idea, right? So that gives us wrong information. So all of these rules are in place for a reason and we must follow these rules. Let's end the session here and we'll start talking about how to map our entities into relational schema design from the next class onwards. All right. Okay. All right, then. Thank you very much. Let's stop the recording here. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. I'm going to have